Are you searching for a deeper understanding of your faith?
Inspiring Philosophy is your go-to resource for exploring the rich tapestry of Christian thought.
From biblical archaeology to philosophy of mind, we dive into the topics that matter.
Our content bridges faith and understanding, offering insights into God's existence and the reliability of the New Testament.
Join a community where faith meets reason and discover the answers you've been seeking.
Inspiring Philosophy, where faith meets understanding.
Erase the name. Now every idol sounds the same. A generation on its knees, begging comfort, calling peace. Oh, this is the price of pride, dancing while the truth just dies. We fear the cross, embrace the chain. Our freedom's just another cage. In the ruins, a whisper stands, scarred and radiant, pierced hands. The silence breaks, the dark retreats. The king returned and thunder breaks. We're the last light fading under broken skies, chasing meaning in electric lights. But grace still burns where shadows fall. The dead arise, he conquers all. Take one last breath before the dawn takes back the
What is going on, guys? Mike is gone. So the only rule that we have for this week is still in action. Lamb, what is that rule?
The rule is there are no rules.
Heck yeah, brother. I'm super excited about this. So if you guys were here yesterday going over the hijab debate that we had, you guys met Lamb/Cam yesterday. He's here to help us out today because today we're going to be taking call-ins for the resurrection of Jesus. So if you are an atheist and you disagree, you think that the resurrection of Jesus did not happen, I'm putting the link in the chat right now, and you guys can start piling in. And you guys might not know who Apologia Center is or Arthur. Why don't you just introduce yourself real quick while I get the link pinned and everything?
Sure, yeah. My name's Arthur. I run a ministry and a YouTube channel called Apologia Center or Apologia Center. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. I had a blast yesterday on Avery's channel, God Logic's channel. We had a really good discussion and took some call-ins. And then Than, well done in keeping your composure as well with hijab. I watched it. I watched the entire thing, bro. I watched your section. I watched his section. And both of you guys, I think, represented the Christian persona, the Christian character of not taking the bait, keeping composure, being loving. I mean, you were like super respectful to him. And I appreciate that because I think the evidence shows character matters is one of the things I try to focus on, man. I a lot of people kind of lose themselves online. But I think character matters, and people who are truly seeking after Jesus are going to see those things, and it goes a long way. So not only the gospel we preach and the evidence we give, but it's also the life lived that is evidential.
100%. I appreciate that, man. So real quick too, we invited you on because we want to talk about your conference. So I'm going to share my screen really quick if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, Mike is gone because he's traveling, but one of the places he's traveling to is here in Los Angeles with us. So hopefully I'll get to see Mike tonight. If not tonight, I'll get to see him tomorrow morning.
This in the chat too for you guys, by the way, while Arthur is talking about this.
And so we are having an event. It's a half-day event. It's a conference of sorts and a worship night. So we call it a night of worship and apologetics, and we call it Praise with Reason because Christianity is an evidential worldview. And so we praise God with reasons. It's not just random, blind faith sort of thing. And this time we did this in October. We had Ruslan and David Wood here. And this time we have Michael Jones and Avery. And Michael Jones is going to be speaking about the Trinity because the focus is on cults, and cults reject the Trinity. I haven't come across a cult that accepts the Trinity, so we thought that would be fitting. And then Avery's going to be talking about the Islamic dilemma with some caveats and nuances in there, and then I will be speaking about the emergence or the rise of the American cults, because specifically Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, or the LDS Church, and Christian Science, and how they came out of the same area, same historical and geographical kind of setting, and what the reasons for those things might have been. Tickets are $60. We provide dinner. So we have a dinner and mingle time from 5 to 6, and then we get into our event, and we have a panel discussion at the end, to be done at 10. We just want to invite anyone that is in the LA area. And so, yeah. Yeah,
this looks like a stacked schedule. I'm jealous. I'm not. Look at this guy. Look at these guys, man. Like,
they look good.
Come on. Yeah. So if you're in the area, definitely go check it out. And yeah, I'm super excited to hear about how it goes. So, all right. Normally what I do is I start off with just like a little slideshow for the resurrection and all that stuff. But I'm feeling a little spontaneous today. So we're just not going to do that. So we're just going to take callers right away. And then we'll just kind of see how this goes. Make sure you guys like and share. And we only got 2 people in here so far. So make sure you send people in here to talk to us if they disagree. All right, I'm going to bring up our first guest here. Agnostic, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
What's going on, man? I'm assuming you are agnostic.
Good assumption. Good assumption. Well, thank you for having me on. What I'd like to do is do a quick comparison of worldviews. I do have a syllogistic statement of belief. Well, not of belief, but that can get me to my position. I was wondering if you would like to present first or second a syllogism that gets you to belief in the Christian God.
What's up, Arthur or Lamb? Do you guys want to do anything like that? Because at least in my case, I'm like a hardcore evidentialist. Like, I'm actually just not even a fan of syllogisms in the first place. I look at basically almost everything through the lens of probability. So,
I can do it Bayesian if you want Bayesian.
Sure.
Okay. So when we look at a Bayesian model, what would be more likely? If a historian exists, they would write about events of their time, or they would not write about events of their time?
You're going to have to add a lot more content in order to actually...
Sure. If we have a historian in America today, let's go for the time and place which historians go by. So we would assume, given a historian lives in the time and place of certain events, that historian would write about it. It'd be a likely occurrence.
No, I still don't think that follows. There are events, for example, there's events that happen in my life all the time, and I don't write about it.
But you're not a historian.
Well, how are you using the word historian?
A historian is somebody whose job is to track history.
Okay. So does Bart Ehrman, does John Dominic Crossan, does Dale Allison, et cetera, et cetera. They're all historians. Tons of things happen all the time in their everyday life. Tons of events. You like, for instance, by what you're arguing right now, all of these guys should be arguing about COVID-19. We should have very, very, we would, like, if it's likely that historians are going to write about events in their time, well, why don't we have a bunch of historians writing about COVID-19? We have other people writing about COVID-19.
Sure.
But not historians.
I think the way you're using historian with Bart Ehrman, he's more of an academic historian. I'm talking about Flavius Josephus.
Okay. Go with that. Did Josephus write about everything that happened during his lifetime?
He wrote Antiquity of the Jews. So
Correct.
He wrote a lot on this topic. So my main contention, you can tell me if you disagree, is I think about who had the most access to information about Jesus. It'd be people close to that time and place. And Flavius Josephus never accepted the claims of Jesus's divinity. So if we take someone who was closer to that time and place, had more access to people and information, I don't see how I, in modern day America, should believe a claim that somebody whose vocation and location were centered around this didn't find enough evidence to believe.
Okay.
It seems like he had better access to research this than any of us.
So who do you think had better access to the claims of Jesus? Josephus or the disciples of Jesus?
I would say the disciples.
Did the disciples write anything down?
Well, it's really cool because after the Great Commission, I think it says many doubted, and even according to the Gospels, Thomas didn't believe Jesus came back. It says after he went away, many doubted, right? I think it's right after the Great Commission, right? Someone could pull up the verse.
I don't know. I don't know what you're referring to. So if you had a passage I could look up. But my response would be, nonetheless, the disciples believed eventually. Jesus presented himself post-resurrection. So we find all that stuff in the book of Acts, and they wrote these things down. And they believed the claims of Jesus. So if we're going to balance Josephus, who's further removed from the disciples, both, you could say, time-wise and in regards to the relationship, all the people closest to Jesus believed them. As a matter of fact...
No, I don't think all the people believed him, because it's Matthew 28:17. It says, when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. So if you look at even the stories of the Gospels, it's this story of doubting Thomas, of after the Great Commission, they see him and then they're like, you know what, I doubt. And so this story is not too convincing to me when I look at even the disciples had their doubts about this guy via what we're told.
So just one second. You realize that you can still be a Christian and believe the claims of Christianity and have some doubts. You understand that, right?
These people, they're not just Christians, they're disciples. They are, they are the people who actually met him firsthand. I have a
Yeah.
hard time believing that you could meet, the Son of God, part of the Trinity, and then all of a sudden be doubting it. You could walk on water with him. You could see pigs,
Yeah,
demons in them. So
I'm
it's a
going to
little
say
weird
something.
story to me. The story just doesn't make sense. It has a little.
Yeah, I'm going to
think you're
share
reading
something
the
that's just going to
doubt.
fly in the face of what you're saying.
So let me finish my thought, and then you take
Okay,
that.
go ahead.
If that's okay. My point is, I mean, you're reading quite a bit into this whole doubt situation because we get a fuller picture of what happens with the disciples. We also get a picture in the book of Acts of opponents of Jesus, the Pharisees, and lots of priests who end up converting to Christianity and become followers of Jesus and the way. That if I were just to go with your argument, because I don't want to lose track of your argument, because you claim Josephus is closer to the situation and he doubts these things, I think this just completely invalidates this stuff because all the people earlier the people who ended up believing in Jesus were all earlier and closer to the situation than Josephus was. So
Well,
just to take your rationality, I'd go with them, even if some around doubted.
That's the ending of Matthew right there. And what you're talking about with Acts and Romans is you're talking about Paul, of course, and he witnesses.
No. Acts.
You're talking about
I didn't mention
Pharisees.
Romans. Sorry, I didn't mention Romans. I just mentioned Romans.
Acts specifically. My issue is, and I guess I'll leave it at this, is like the disciples had better access to any information than any of us would ever have. They, Matthew Levi got to be called and went from tax collecting to follow Jesus. And
So,
if some of them are going to
agnostic,
doubt,
just because there's a massive problem here from the outset, because it seems like the fundamental aspect of your argument here is like, well, this isn't very convincing because if they saw the risen Jesus, why would they be doubting? So one is the verse says some doubted. Who are the some?
Yeah.
Because if we're looking at the verse itself, when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And then Jesus came and said to them, all authority in earth, and he starts talking to them. So it doesn't record what happens after this. It's some doubted, and then immediately after this, it's and then Matthew ends. So we actually don't know what the actual final results are of their mental states. Matthew doesn't record that. But secondly, if you look at any testimony regarding miracles in general, and I can attest to this myself as somebody that I would argue, I'm not going to use this as an evidential chip for Christianity or anything like that, right? But for instance, in my own personal experience, I had a Christophany. I believe that I had an appearance of Jesus, and I cannot tell you how often I doubt that, how often I psychoanalyze myself. Immediately after I had that, I was literally like, did I just have a hallucination? What's happening? Right? You look at miracle accounts in general, where people are going to testify to having some disease healed or blindness healed, all this other stuff. In fact, I just recorded a reel talking about this. There's a guy, his name is James Drain, and he was blind for many years. He had MS. He had to walk in a wheelchair. He ended up getting baptized, and then after he comes up out of the water, he can see again. Now, I'm not using that as an argument for a miracle at the moment. All I'm going to point to, though, is the first thing he says is he looks at his pastor and he goes, I think I'm imagining things. Like, that's the first thought he says. So, like, this just seems to be like the basic response to a lot of these things.
Well, I'll make this my final thoughts. And thank you for having me up. I appreciate the cordial
Yeah, of course.
So I think the biggest thing is to enter into the Christian worldview. This God knows everything, I think. And you guys aren't Calvinists, right?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, good. That brings up a whole thing about free will, but let's not do that. Not a fan of Calvinism. But with that in mind, this God knows all my thoughts, all my wants, all my desires, everything about me. And this God could present itself in a way that would convince me. But it seems through my life, many people have told me it probably will if I keep praying and asking, but I've been doing this stuff for a long time. It's not fun getting old, but doing it for a long time, and I just haven't seen that. But I'll listen more to the stream, and I just wanted to thank you for having me up.
Yeah, of course.
Have a great
Thanks
day.
for coming up.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we don't have anybody else in the queue. It's a slow day today. So,
You say something
um,
crazy.
say what?
Just say something crazy, and then the queue will get filled
Work
up.
with me if
Like
you
we
might,
think God Logic
please.
got owned.
Oh my
He
gosh,
got
God Logic,
owned.
God Logic got owned. Man, that was a crazy man. I honestly, I was shooketh. I was shooketh, Arthur, because like I just I don't know. And Lamb, I don't know if you watched Lamb's discussion with Hijab as well, but like it was
No.
also yeah, he
Wait,
was
wait,
up there
what
too.
was that?
Yeah, he was up there too. Why don't you explain, Lamb?
Oh, I gotta get back on that.
Yeah, so I brought up the moral incoherency argument that I'd created against like the Islamic moral paradigm, and the whole conversation with them was just they couldn't get past. Like I made a syllogized argument, and they couldn't get past P1, and they just kept repeating the same thing over and over again, and like they would say something like, well, can't this argument also just be used for Christianity? Like, couldn't you just like take out Islam, plug Christianity, and boom, the argument could work? And we went through that over and over. And yeah, and then I can't remember the other guy's name. I forgot. But yeah, he like jumped in and was saying like I had like a false argument or statement because I'm saying it's an Islamic argument, but it could be used against like Mormonism or something. And it definitely didn't last as long as Than's, but
Gotta go back and look at that.
I mean, half of the time that I got that's like bonus time compared to you could probably be accounted for by Hijab monologuing.
that is true. He was putting me to sleep.
I know.
You know,
I
it was
just
interesting to me. I'll say this: that this was an observation I had. Than, he was really low in energy when your conversation was going on, and then his energy level just like spiked with Avery. Like even like physical demeanor and stuff like that. And I find
Yeah.
out I find that to be very interesting.
Well, so maybe you can help me understand something here too, because I am looking at the philosophical confidence. Okay, that's the key word, not competence. Confidence that he exuded with Avery, but he didn't do that to me too. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm trying to make sense of things because I'm was he just acting dumb or did he not know these things? Like I had no clue, but
Yeah. Or he
very
wasn't
weird.
functioning at the fullest awareness level that he could be with you.
Possibly.
Hint, hint, wink,
Who
wink.
knows?
Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Well, let's get some super chats here while we wait for our next guest here. That logic simply doesn't follow. The vast majority of historians write about it times they didn't live in. It's a fundamental aspect of the discipline itself. Yes, exactly. Also,
Yeah, I found that interesting to use that as like a P1 in that situation. That like it's more likely that they wrote stuff out. I mean, historians leave things out all the time, and important things. They just can't write about everything.
Yeah, there's even like I thought he was gonna try to do like an argument from silence with Josephus, because there's actually some stuff that like Josephus doesn't record that you would quote unquote expect him to, right? So for anybody that's interested in understanding why arguments from silence are not good arguments, I always plug this Timothy McGrew's paper, literally titled "The Argument from Silence." It's open access too on his website. It's a must read. There's math in it, so I just prepare yourself for that. Fan, we're gonna get GTA 6 before your second temple vid. Okay. So let me clarify something here, because Mike and I actually had a miscommunication on what he wanted from me with that. So the second temple messianic expectation video is not going to be a video outlining all of the Second Temple messianic expectations and how Jesus fits into the picture. Instead, what Mike was wanting me to do was give N.T. Wright's argument about the mutation of messianic expectation, and that mutation is actually going to be an evidence for Christianity. So it's in our editor's pile of things to edit, but I think at the end of this month, possibly, you guys will be getting my 2 Powers video. I can check our schedule real quick here. That's going to take too long, so I'm not going to do that. Just it'll be out at some point. So, but if you guys want like a video on actual Second Temple messianic expectations themselves, maybe we can do something on Inspiring Philosophy Academy too, as well. All right. I fear that moral anti-realism might be true, and I'm also not sure if we can make a good case for free will. Any recommendations, thoughts? Yeah. Look, Arthur, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I don't. It's look, I do. One of the difficulties, I think, when we do philosophy, and then we're doing essentially philosophical theology, and I just want to warn people with this. And I'll tell you the reason exactly why I'm about to say what I'm about to say. So I have a bachelor's degree in biblical studies, and then I went for a master's degree in philosophy. Now, I got my philosophy degree at a seminary, so I took 20, 30 some odd classes, units of theology as well. One of the things that I saw that was problematic with my fellow philosophy nerds was sometimes they would jump the gun on certain philosophical views without considering the biblical data. And I found that to be problematic as a Christian who believes that the Bible is the word of God and authoritative. And there's things the Bible, I think, is silent on and Christians can disagree about, like within like a philosophical framework. So just my, I guess, thought here would be very careful with just looking at a philosophical idea and saying this is convincing and it sounds good and stuff like that without taking into account the biblical data. Now, if you've already taken the biblical data into account and you're still coming to a conclusion like that, that's a different kind of conversation. It's just some wisdom I'm trying to, impart here. Take the Bible seriously, do your hermeneutics properly, right? Like study it into the ground and see whether it's even remotely gives you the option to go in a certain area. So I'll just leave it there.
No, I love that. Lamb, you got anything for this?
Yeah. So I guess Arthur said like you have to take a lot of the scriptural aspects, I think, foremost in order to kind of structure your way through the philosophy. Because otherwise, if you were to say that you did, I would just recommend books like The Moral Universe by like Cuneo and Schaefer Landau as something you can read on like moral realism. But I feel like that if it's the case that scripture is how it is, and if you were to take it as such, it does leave you very, very little room to sort of navigate to a position where anti-realism is going to be something that I think is like true. But that would have to be something I'd have to talk to you about, like to understand the position on how moral anti-realism would be true from a scriptural aspect.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add into this, just real quick, is like, look, if you have not encountered any good arguments against anti-realism and against free will, and instead what is happening that is, and I'm saying this because the overwhelming majority of the time that I'm dealing with people doubting things like this on the internet, this is what's happening. So if this is not you, then this doesn't have to do with you. But the overwhelming majority of the time, what ends up happening is people will allow themselves to get gaslit by internet atheists and skeptics. If that's you, get off the internet. And I mean that in the most loving way possible. Like seriously, if you don't have the mental fortitude And that is not the same thing as IQ or intelligence or anything like that. I'm talking about like the character to not be shaken by whatever comes at you, right? And I'm sure Arthur, you're like vibing with what I'm saying right now too, probably. If that's not you yet, you need to get off the internet because you will get gaslit by skeptics very easily, and it happens all the time. It takes time, and you need to find a mentor that can help you be confident and also think properly. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is you're going to hear some smug weirdo on the internet be like, "Herpaderpader, herpaderpader, no free will," and then you're going to be like, I have no clue how to answer this, and there's nothing to answer half the time because the guy just sounds really confident, and that's it.
That's right.
So,
Well, which is to make a reference back to the hijab conversation you guys had. He says things like extremely confident, and then also has this ability of intentionally leaving out information that he knows is damning to his position. But his audience doesn't catch on to that because of his
yeah,
confidence, because of the bravado he comes on to a situation. Look, those of us who've been doing this for a very long time and public speaking and all that stuff. Now, I've been in ministry for 20 years, in various settings, like pastorally predominantly. But you can get up there and sway a crowd. Like, it takes a lot of character control to say, I'm not gonna like bamboozle, or I'm not gonna manipulate the crowd I'm speaking to. I'm gonna present material in a fair. And then speech
mhm,
giving has its things. When moments calls for getting emotional, you get emotional, raising your voice, lowering down, like all those things go into the art of public speaking. But when you are kind of an unsuspecting individual, and then you're confronted with someone who's got that down very well, knows how to interrupt you, when to interrupt you so you don't finish your thoughts. Those are all like systematic. And if you're not catching on that, or they change the goalposts, they'll bring in a new subject, and you can't kind of stop and say, "Hey, we were just talking about this. Can we go back to that? You made a claim. Can you defend the claim you just made?" Like, this takes preparation. It takes a lot of time, you guys. And yeah, at that I'm completely in agreement with you. I think people are like way too quick to become Christians or buy into this, and then all of a sudden be like, yeah, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. I'm gonna go on TikTok and argue with people. I'm huge when it comes to discipleship. I think, Matthew 28, man, go make disciples. And one of the things that we need to do is slow down, become disciples, learn all the things that we should learn, and then get into those conversations. Not that we can't get into other conversations, but just know what we're going into. And so you want to be a bit wise and careful with that. I'm a big proponent of the local church. If you're not involved in a local church, you don't have people that are in authority over you. I think, like elders. Um, be very careful with that. Be very careful with becoming a personality of sorts online, because it could really, really damage your walk with the Lord, I think.
mhm.
So again, I mean, we've kind of gone away from this super chat, but I think that's just wisdom coming. If you take it as an older brother, just saying, "Hey guys,
Yeah,
these are mistakes I've seen people make. Be careful with them," like including ideas.
yeah,
Because those things, it doesn't have to be a modern person, right? Like, you can read an idea. Today I was discussing with a bunch of high school students a bit about Aristotle and Aristotle's view of women. And like, you can read that stuff and then go through the argumentation and be like, man, Aristotle makes a lot of sense here. It's like, without considering what the data biblically is and how he's wrong about a number of these things.
amen, brother. All right. I can't. What am I supposed to?
Histopku
Histopku
from
from
Sophic.
Safek Halakik. Open question, not disbelief. Disciples worshipped while holding. Oh, he's talking about the okay.
Wait, hang on,
The
what?
disciples
Is that
worshipped while holding the resurrection miracle, i.e., they were amazed.
that's not the Greek. I'm sorry, I
I'm
don't
trying
know
to
where he's getting
find.
that info from.
No. I think what he's trying to reference is. Hold on. What was the Matthew passage that other guy was talking about?
Matthew 28:17. I have it open. I'm looking at it. The Greek word there is distazo, which means doubt or to waver.
Hold on. Yeah, I'm pulling up the Greek right now. do, 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 do. Yeah, it's distazo.
Yeah,
To
I
be
don't know whether
uncertain.
he's.
Yeah.
I know there's a trend here, Than. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Cam, you too. There's this trend, and I suspect this is what this individual is doing, of
I
looking
think
at the
this is a
Greek
Christian
text.
from what
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen.
I know this is a Christian, but like Christians do this, and I've seen it, and I have problems with it. Is that there's this trend where we will read the Bible and then see it in the Greek, let's just say, and then people ignore the Greek and they go, well, the Hebrew word would have been this, or the Aramaic word would have been this, but we don't have those things written in that form. And then try to make some kind of an argument out of that. I just have a hard time with it because the inspired text that we have in our hands is the Greek. We don't have other texts to go off of and say, oh, well, this would have been the equivalent. Jesus probably spoke this. Even if Jesus spoke this, the view is that the inspired text is written in the Greek. And so I have a hard time with some of these things. Okay, yeah, he's making a reference to the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, and that's what is. Okay,
I got you.
I don't know what are your thoughts on this, guys?
I have to know what his broader argument is and all that stuff.
He's saying the word shouldn't be doubt; it should be amazed. That they didn't doubt, they were amazed.
No, I understand that much. I would want to know the actual process of how he gets there, right?
Yeah.
So, because like that just goes into a broader issue that I have in general, which is like, I see and I'm not saying fish in a tie is doing this either or anything like that. It's more like just what you see happening a lot. And Lamb, you argue with people on TikTok, so you see this a lot too, probably. Like people just kind of go into Strong's like the Bible Hub interlinear, then they go to use Strong's, and then they just like make an argument out of that. And it's like, whoa, let's slow down, right? Like that has nothing to do with what I think Fish is doing. It's just in general, people are a little fast and loose with that.
Well, yeah, they're called word study fallacies, and this is where like the kind of academic approach to some of these things, or like when you get professionally trained in some of these things, versus people who are kind of doing it from an armchair perspective. And I'm not trying to pull rank here or anything like that. I just like people who are doing the armchair thing can learn to do it properly. Words, like they have meanings alone, but the best way to understand words are within their context.
Yeah.
Like if you open up a dictionary and you look up the word cool, it's going to give you a number of options. Like you really don't know what the word means unless it's used in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that sentence becomes, that's a cool car, versus today is a cool day, now you know what the word means. It is not enough to pull up a word, go to Strong's, look up the number and word study and be like, oh, this is the meaning of the word. Christians, please stop doing that, because that's when you come across like just really bad arguments, and then you come across word study fallacies. Then dunamis becomes, this is dynamite power, versus no, it's power. That's all it means.
Dedicating bench to Than today. Heck yeah, brother. Heck yeah. That's what's up.
I like
Arthur,
the way
how
you
much
say
bench,
brother,
bro?
man. How much do I bench?
Yeah.
I don't bench, bro. I don't.
You said
I hate the gym.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You said you
pretty
like the way I
decent
said brother.
Yeah, I like the way you say brother, because it's really, really close to the Hawkster for all the Hawk.
That's the whole entire point. That's the whole entire point. I'm trying to be like Hulk Hogan.
No, I can see the similarity.
I appreciate it. All right. What's a good argument against brute facts, PSR? Hey man, look, so there's well, actually, I want to honor my guests here really quick. Does anybody want to say anything on that?
We'll see.
On PSR, I don't know if PSR would be a good argument against brute facts. I know Graham Oppie actually had some good points when he discussed like PSR I believe like reducing the things always being necessary, like all things would be necessary in the universe. Um, it really depends, I think, on how someone relegates brute facts in their argument. Typically, when people are using brute facts, I think they do like something that would be a mistake, which is like a worldview comparison when they do brute facts. And I don't think people tend to understand brute facts in terms of like, is it the most auxiliary in terms of being something that's going to account for all the data. I think a lot of times when you hear like an atheist, especially on TikTok, and they use like brute facts, it's sort of like a means to throw in undetermined or unexplained phenomenon that they might not like consider to be God. And I think we kind of seen that with like IP and Richard Carrier, right? Where like Richard Carrier would say like he would sort of say this thing's like a brute fact, but then all aspects of this like brute fact are just things that we would like metaphysically conceive of as being like God, and in the most typical sense. And so again, it just really depends on who you're talking to and how they use it. But I personally probably wouldn't use PSR to argue against it.
Yeah, I mean, just a short thing here is, look, there's going to be ways that you can argue against brute facts. But at the end of the day, I'm lazy. Like, I'm lazy. I'm in a discussion. I don't want to waste energy and time. I have very limited energy and time. Okay. And so if I can just kind of grant things and then still get to my intended conclusion, I'm happy. Right. And so that's one of the nice things about kind of probabilistic arguments. I can just be like, that's fine. Brute facts are possible. Okay, let's grant that. Well, here's my thesis. There's one God, and then I run my theistic prediction argument. Now, atheism doesn't make any predictions, but since you are going to want to posit a bunch of brute facts, well, what is the thing that actually explains the world we live in? And then from there, you're going to watch the theories compound on top of each other. And you're going to have not just one brute fact, but multiple brute facts. And those brute facts are also going to have brute facts contained within them, right? Because it's not like you're just going to have this one particle, right? But that one particle is going to have a particular drift. And that particular drift is going to have a quantifiable limit. But there's not going to be an explanation to the quantifiable limit of that spin or that drift. And so those are going to be brute facts, and then you get the point. And that's going to drastically keep lowering the priors of those theories, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I go about things. And grant what you can. Y'all ever think you're too dumb to do something like finish a project, pursue graduate studies, etc. I mean, dude, I don't even know how I got here in the first place. Okay.
Yeah, true.
Whose idea was it to put a camera here and put a mic in front of me and people want to listen to me? You know what I'm saying? But what about you guys?
Yeah, man, I'll tell you this. Just like jumping into, so I got my master's from Talbot School of Theology and Philosophy, the philosophy department. And I'd say probably 90% of my classmates were way smarter than I am and way more knowledgeable in regards to like philosophy. Their background was actually in philosophy. Like folks would show up with, undergraduate studies from Berkeley in philosophy, and kind of, I felt very lost often, but you learn and you move on. My recommendation would be not to compare yourself in those ways. If it's the sort of thing where you can push yourself and learn. I mean, there's ideas that took me a year to kind of figure out, and I struggled through it quite a bit. I mean, to the point of having like panic attacks and stuff. And it took me some time, and I had good people around me that guided me through it. And I think if you push yourself and kind of don't do the comparison thing, know that, look, we're all limited in various ways, and there's things you're probably very good at that other people aren't. Like, I don't know everything. I mean, I guarantee you. I mean, the Bayesian stuff, like the Bayesian stuff is like that like He's way more knowledgeable on that stuff than I am. But some, good chunk of that stuff goes over my head, and that's okay. Like I don't trip out if people say stuff. I'm like, man, I know this guy. He knows this stuff really well. Go check him out. And so in regards to, I was talking to a friend about pursuing a PhD, and then here's what this is a person who has a PhD, written many books, kind of on the tail end of their careers and stuff. And he looked at me. He said, Arthur, getting a PhD has nothing to do with how smart you are.
Mm-hmm.
What it has to do with is how disciplined you are. Can you sit down? Can you do the work? Can you get it done? And so some people are highly intelligent, but just don't have the discipline to sit down and do it. And some people are, Than loses attention really quickly. And some people, like I remember talking to Paul Copan, and he's like, yeah, I did my PhD, and I had 4 kids, and I was working a job. And I was just like, yeah, you're very disciplined, like you did what you were supposed to do when you were supposed to do it. And Paul Copan was encouraging me that it could be done. Don't worry about it. That's partly because I have 4 kids. So it's how disciplined you are. Don't the intelligence stuff you can grow in. Don't worry about that. Don't compare yourself to people. I'm sure you have great gifts from God.
Yeah. And also, just real quick in my defense, Arthur, I've actually wanted to go get PhD at some point, but every single philosopher, like I literally had Paul Draper say this to my face just a few months ago as I was contemplating things. He said, Than, why would you waste your time or money?
I've had people tell me the same exact thing.
So
you're already doing it. Like what are you going to do different? Is the question I've had people ask is, you're going to go get this degree. What are you going to do with it? Because if it's really not going to change your life, you could go just get it because you want to study a subject more in detail and all that stuff. But you can also do that alone. I mean, we have plenty of stuff online, and various ways you can learn this information. But I've had many people tell me, like, if you're not going to pursue it in a certain direction and stuff like that, don't waste your time and money. And I just ask, I guess, more life questions. Part of the reason why I haven't pursued a PhD, one of the reasons, is because I have young children and I don't want to miss out on them growing up. Like, I prefer to spend my time and influence on my children rather than getting a degree. Maybe when they're older, I might pursue something like that. But like I don't want to go into a PhD program and then lose all this time with my kids. And next thing you know, my kids, from being 5 to 10 years old, and I'm like, what happened? Like, where was I? Like, my kids are more important than a piece of paper.
Heck yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh.
Go for it.
How do you guys solve the irreconcilable contradiction of the crucifixion that would eventually disprove the resurrection? The Gospel of Matthew 26:29 and John 19:28. Is this? Hold on. What was it? 26:29.
29.
Oh gosh, it's this thing. Okay, I tell you, I will never drink of this fruit of the vine until a day I drink and blah blah blah. Okay, and I'm assuming John is the crucifixion where he drinks the sour cup. Great. All right, for anybody that doesn't know, the reason I'm reacting the way I am is because this is apparently a new Muslim argument that just
This is hilarious.
This is hilarious because if you just take a second to understand the Second Temple context of what's being said, you would very clearly understand that Matthew's gospel is talking about a liturgical Passover cup. And what you have in John 19:28 through 30 is what? The sour, it's like vinegar. This isn't the liturgical cup. The first cup that's being mentioned in Matthew is an eschatological liturgical mention. The fruit of the vine is a very specific phrase, and Jesus did not have that in the crucifixion when he was being crucified.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with actually partaking of something. What it has to do with is what Jesus is doing with his disciples there. This is the cup of the new covenant, is what he says. Right? And so that's the proper context of understanding it. In John 19, they're not participating in the cup of the new covenant.
No, that it's literally just a cheap soldier's drink.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. It said it's irreconcilable. So
We just
Yeah.
reconciled it, man.
There's actually nothing to reconcile. There's nothing to reconcile.
Here's what I would
This is
say,
a
by
forced
the way.
contradiction. Sorry, go ahead, Art.
Just for this person, for your sake and sanity, whenever you present something like this, you might want to be a little careful with your wording. Like, say something like, how do you guys solve the seemingly irreconcilable? Instead of assuming your conclusion into your question. Then, because if you do that, sometimes you end up looking like a fool, and you don't want to do that.
Oh my gosh, this guy. It's Vine, dude. Look, I don't like if you just want to presuppose Islam and think that this is just like we think the Bible is something that fell out of the sky. Okay, fine. That's not what we believe. We are looking at this from a historical perspective. The fruit of the vine is a very specific phrase. This is not everything that comes from a vine and you drink of it. Like, words have meaning, but they don't have inherent meaning. You have to take what the intended elocution is of Jesus here, and that is demanded by the context. The context tells us what it is, which is the thing we're talking about. Jesus doesn't say, hey, I'm not going to have anything that ever comes from grapes whatsoever, never again until, like, that's not what's happening. If this is the way you read things, then I better never hear any of the Dawa guys ever again say the Quran doesn't tell us that it's fully confirming or anything like that. The Quran's telling us it's generally confirming and consciously editing the previous scriptures.
Yep.
I better never hear you say that again, because the Quran, hey, says it's confirming, and that's all it's saying. Never says it's consciously editing. I know you don't read that way when it comes to the Quran. So why are you reading this way when it comes to the Bible? It's pretty obvious why.
Yeah, our challenge is just like, hey, be fair in your reading. And there are some crossovers as to how we read literature, right? Like, especially religious literature. And that's important. Like, take that into consideration. When you're trying to critique Christianity and do an internal critique, take all of that stuff into consideration. Like, do your hermeneutics properly, because even in Islam, you do hermeneutics. That's why you have the hadiths, because quite a bit of the Quranic stuff is vague and ambiguous. So you need the hadiths to clarify that. And so we apply hermeneutical methods to understanding the text. And so just be very careful there. Like, for example, when Jesus says, I won't partake of this cup till the end of the age, he's talking about the culmination of all things. He's talking about the completion of everything. I think that's what Dan was referring to when he spoke about the eschatological kind of approach to this thing. That's not what's going on the cross at the crucifixion. So the context matters quite a bit, and you got to be fair about it. If you're going to be unfair about it and just throw stuff around because you want to up one a Christian, then again, you're going to look like a fool.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next super chat here. Than, very submissive to Muhammad hijab, changing his name to Thanos. Actually, Mike had my name as Thanos, and I just didn't want to change it. But yes, I don't know if you caught that, Artur, though, in my discussion.
Yeah, he kept calling you Thanos.
You know what's funny is when he first called you that, he says, "Yeah, Thanos," and I don't mean that disrespectfully, like that. Like, he had to substantiate that him calling you Thanos wasn't disrespectful.
Oh man! Hey, we actually got somebody in the queue right now, so let's bring him up. Michael Smith, how's it going? Can you hear us? Hello? We can't hear you, brother, unless... Yeah. All right, I'm gonna put you back into the queue, Michael, until you figure out your mic situation. And then we'll just go back to super chats for now. Okay, so what were you saying about the Thanos thing? Somebody was saying, or were we done on that? Sorry, I got sidetracked. ADHD moment.
We were done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Michael, just there's a little private chat to the right-hand side. Once you figure that out, you can just send us a message in there. Cam just be thirst trapping with us with that blue steel. Dude, okay, so Arthur, you watched Zoolander before, right?
Once, probably.
Okay. But you know what we're saying when we say blue steel?
Nope.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to learn. Hold on. Because while Cam was debating hijab, well, why don't you tell him, Cameron? Like the state of affairs, I guess.
I've been recovering from an illness. I've been sick, and at the time I was debating him, I actually had a migraine, and so I couldn't like look at my PC, my monitor, and so while I'm debating, I'm just making like a lot of facial expressions. My eyes are twitching, and apparently it looks like I'm one of the models from Zoolander. I guess the way my eyebrows move or something.
Oh my God.
All right, here we go. You're going to love this. Share screen. Boom.
Everything turns into a meme nowadays, man.
I know.
Oh, this is like when they turn and they look into the camera.
Impressive.
He was basically just making that face to Mohammed Hijab.
Well, Mohammed
was-
Hijab started like bouncing his pecs around at one point.
Dude, no, the
And all
thing that made
Muslims
me
in
the
chat
most
were like, wow,
uncomfortable,
look at his pecs. His pecs are winning.
dude, the thing that was weird, the weirdest part was like, as he was debating Avery, there was a part where because he has like a little zip hoodie on, and as he's talking to Avery, he's like, and like zipping it down, and I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing? And he's like, I think he decided that was a weird idea, so he should stop, and so he started going back up.
And maybe somebody in the back said, stop doing that because you look like an absolute narcissist.
Maybe. All right, Michael Smith, can you hear us? We still can't hear you, brother. Darn, man. All right, well, keep trying, I guess. We'll see what happens. We're just going to keep doing super chats. Doesn't Arthur know
Arthur,
that
forgot
meaning is
him.
subjective and that we can just decide what things mean? Who needs scholarships?
You're right.
Use your brain and make meaning within. What do you have to
I
say
agree.
to that?
So I completely agree with it. And the meaning I'm going to take from this statement right now is that Arthur is the best guy and everybody should go and subscribe to my channel.
You know what? I actually agree with that.
There we go.
So maybe it isn't
you should be,
subjective.
unless. Okay, I'm gonna have to yell at Matt because I asked him to fix that. Your channel should be in the description, but I think he probably just didn't have time.
Okay.
So what I'll do is, Matt, Arthur, can you just put your a link to your channel
hi
in the
to
chat?
everyone in the comment section.
Say what?
Hello. I'll just write hello to everyone in the comments.
Hold on. I just got the funniest message in Discord. So you know the argument that I was trying to run on Muhammad Hijab, right? Lamb. I don't know if you've seen my own version of the Islamic dilemma, Arthur, but basically I just grant the general
you were
concept.
doing a good job presenting that.
Yeah, because you grant it, and then basically what ends up happening is it's like literally just epistemically impossible to verify the Muhammad's a true prophet. So somebody is doing an outreach thing at a college, and I just got a message saying your argument has just been destroying all the Dawa tables here. Sorry. Okay. Let's move on until we get another guest, I guess. Arthur, by the way, like our call-in streams never go this way. So I think what's happening is they're just terrified of you and Lamb.
I'm like the nicest guy in the Christian YouTube space. I'll take that. When people call in, like I don't cut them off. I don't block them. I just let them talk. Sit there and listen. I take notes. So I don't know why.
I think really they see me and they're like, oh, I don't want to get on there. I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah, I think it's more like they're looking at you guys and going, "These are the guys that destroyed his job. We're not going to take him on."
I'm super nice. I've never watched. I've never seen any of your call-in streams. I just don't consume content in general. So please don't. Like, I don't even watch Mike's videos. All right.
Mike's like, "Hey, Dan, what did you think about that?" He's like, "I'll call you back in 30 minutes."
No. I'm just typically honest with him. He'll be like, "Hey, what'd you think about this video?" Or like, usually if he wants me to see something, it's to review something before we post it. But if it's something that's been out for a while, Mike will be like, "Well, what'd you think about that video I posted like blah 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 months ago?" And I'll be like, "Mike, I don't watch your stuff, bro. Like, what you?" Oh man! But I promise, guys, I'm nice.
Somebody said, "What's Arthur's native language?" I'm Armenian, so my native language, my first language, is Armenian. So I learned English. Oh man, I learned English as a teenager. It was interesting that you picked up on that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably because Arthur is
it's an Eastern European way of writing Arthur.
Well, we got somebody else in the chat, and it's actually a guy that I really like. I've talked to him a few times. He's Koopa. Can you hear us, man?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, yeah, sir. Man. Yeah, you have to remind me because I always forget if you're an atheist or an agnostic.
I'd say at this point more of a agnostic. I'd say, yeah.
Wait, does that mean you've progressed from atheism to agnosticism?
Progress.
Well, I think I would have been more of like a more of a naturalist, but I think some of the modern miracles stuff is pretty interesting, and I'm like, hey, I'm pretty willing to, bring the supernatural into the possibilities that I'm considering. So
there we go.
Okay, one. I'm actually going to table something for a second because this just Koopa. I want you to understand something really important to me about that, what you just said, which is I have been trying to get people to get behind the argument for miracles for a long time. And not like, and the thing is, like, I have a lot of Christians most of the time that are dissenters to that argument. They're like, it's not going to work, miracles, blah, blah, blah. So just hearing you say that, it's moved the needle in some direction, whatever the direction is in general, right? Like that just warms my heart. Like, I actually just really want to say thank you for being honest about that and like coming up here to say that. That's really cool to me, man.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it should move the needle at least a little bit for people. Not saying it needs to be conclusive, but certainly I think it's kind of hard to explain on naturalist worldview. At least like some of the examples that are brought up, maybe others, but the ones that you tend to present are stronger.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a miracle that I think you just can't deny, though. Okay, I couldn't find my car keys the other morning, and so I prayed to find them, and then I found.
Hey, man, I pray for parking all the time.
Well, what's going on, man? It's kind of a chill stream today, I guess. So, resurrection, but what's up?
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that that I have a harder time like getting behind with some of the truth claims of Christianity are just like some of the gospel claims. I don't think that the gospels need to be like 100% reliable or whatever to be able to glean some stuff from them. But I do think sometimes that they have things in them that make me question whether we should consider them reliable enough to like draw the conclusion that they're accurately retelling things that, and from there that we can go on to think that Jesus rose from the dead. Some more of the like historical reportage model adjacent stuff. And one set of things that I think makes it a little bit more difficult to believe that is also just seeing places where it seems like the authors are like making intentional changes to facts. And I think that there's maybe not a whole ton of them, but I do think there are a few places that make me think that. And I think that like Galilee versus Jerusalem, like the location of the post-resurrection appearances between Mark and Matthew, and then placing it in Galilee, or at least only narrating Galilee, and then Luke later narrating Jerusalem. That's like one instance I may be considering talking about, but I'm also glad to just discuss gospel reliability stuff.
Arthur, Lamb, you guys got anything you want to say in response?
Yeah, the simple point I would just make that's important for this is that the Gospels are not just historical documents. They're not just retelling history. They have a purpose to the way they're telling the story. They're trying to get at a certain point. And so that impacts the genre that we're looking at. What is it that we're actually reading? And whether and then like the way quotations work, because some of this stuff are like quotations from Jesus. So I would again just recommend what's the genre we're looking at? Gospels. What are they trying to accomplish? They might be all trying to accomplish different sort of stuff, and so they leave things out, they bring things in, or they will actually change some stuff around. I don't necessarily disagree that the authors do that. And I don't think that impacts reliability, because I don't think they're trying to tell you a story the way we would understand like historical retelling. Like the modern way of doing history is not how the ancients did history. And that's very important, especially in the first century. I think Craig Keener would be a guy that I would look at when it comes to the genre of the Gospels and how others told history during the same time period. And the comparisons there.
Do you know, is that similar to like, I think Mike Lacona also talks about some of that sort of stuff, and also talks about literary devices or ways that certain ancient authors described things. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mike's right on some of that stuff.
So what I'm gonna do at this point is just make something, because Koopa, you already know this, but Lamb, I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of these parts of these discussions, but this is part of the divide amongst Christians when they do historical reconstructions of the Gospels, because I don't fall into the Lacona camp and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a step back here, if that's okay with you, Arthur, and kind of let you defend this stuff, and then just let me know if you guys want me to interject or anything like that. Is that fair? Because what I don't want to do is like mess with your mojo in your model at that point.
No, look, I'm fine with Christian scholarship disagreeing on these things, and then trying to make sense of it. Because everybody essentially is talking around the same thing, right? It's not like I don't think like my way of defending it has to be the right way. Now, my way of defending it is a way of trying to reconcile these things instead of like immediately concluding that it's just incorrect information being communicated in the Gospels.
Yeah, no, I that's not, sorry, that probably came out the wrong way then. There's two competing models at that point.
I don't mind you jumping in and
there's two competing models at that point, and otherwise it would just muddy the conversation, if that makes sense. And I don't
mind it. I mean, if we're gonna like what I would prefer, I guess in these conversations with Koopa, it'd be like, can we look at some specifics and see where those things are? Because it's not like the entire thing's like that. Like, can we look at some specifics and see if we can come to reasonable conclusions why they're reliable?
Sure. Well, I mean, so I think that the way that Luke seems to change the location here kind of makes me doubt that other places that he is narrating things that you could take him at his word for it, mostly because it's a larger like departure from the things that appeared before, right? So in Luke, let's see, where is it? Luke 24, I think, like 33 or 36 or whatever. I'll just paraphrase that. Basically, they went back to Jerusalem and like were assembling there, and then Jesus appeared to them. And then I think, so if you look at like Luke 24, 36 through 50, it's basically, Jesus appearing to them in Jerusalem and then him ascending to heaven after that. What you get in Mark and Matthew mostly is, I guess Mark doesn't narrate a post-resurrection appearance, but the angel mentions that that the disciples will go to Galilee and see Jesus there. And then Matthew goes and does mention, or does narrate a post-resurrection like appearance of some sort off in Galilee. And so like, I think, I don't know, what do you think if we were to talk about what happened here, like historically, like what do you think did happen? Like, do you think that that both places, like Jesus appeared to them in some sense? Do you think that Jesus may have appeared to them only in one location, but there's some reworking of material by Luke or things like that, or like some other idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, one thing I would say is that Luke has a theme of Jerusalem being extremely central. Like constantly, there's references to walking up to Jerusalem. That's thematic in Luke. So Jerusalem, and part of the reason why that's the case is because that's where the passion happens, and Luke's kind of always pointing to Jesus ending up in Jerusalem. It's extremely central. So I think, we do have multiple appearances. We got the Road to Emmaus guys, Jesus appearing to these people. Could it be that he potentially appeared at multiple times? I think that's a possibility. And then it could be that Luke condenses this and makes it like a focus on Jerusalem. That's a possibility. I'd throw those things out there.
So that's actually going to be a place where we probably agree. Yeah, because I think Luke has a habit of condensing. Actually, like so. For instance, I think it's in Galatians. Let me find it quick. Let's see. Yeah. So, for instance, Paul tells us that he went to Arabia for 3 years, and that's in Galatians 1:16 through 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we read Acts, and I know this is presuming a few things, Koopa, if you're just like willing to work with me in terms of like authorship and all that stuff, if you disagree with anything, right? But if we read Acts 9, that seems like there's a contradiction then, right? Because it seems like Paul goes directly to Jerusalem. But now you have to ask the question, right? Like, how long is a period of many days? And if you're only reading Acts, well, it doesn't really tell you. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a 3-year period or anything like that. But if Luke is just compressing this story, that makes total sense, right? So if he has like a habit of doing these things, then we might say, for instance, part of explaining what we're seeing here is going to be compression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think.
And I'm sure you've heard this from like Eric Manning and stuff too, right?
Yeah, I have. I've seen some of his videos on that as well, and I think ironically that's probably another part where like I would probably point kind of in the same direction that I'm talking about, of like Luke making a more intentional change. Assuming that they were written by the same author, but I think a lot of people would say that.
So here's the important question here. Is this an actual change, right? Like, so let me give you an example of what I'm trying to zero in on. Suppose Arthur and I went on a fishing trip together. Okay, and the actual events that happened were, we woke up in the morning, we had breakfast, and then we got in the car, and then we went on our boat, and then Arthur caught a bass, and then I caught a trout, and then we go home. Okay. Now, if I am relaying that story and I'm using those, and I'm using language like, first we did X, and then we did Y, and then we did, well, you get the point, right? So if I'm using those temporal language markers, I better make sure, like, if I'm being honest and not changing anything, then it better actually be in that chronological order, right? It should be event 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. You can change the story in a way that doesn't change the historical facts, though, by removing the temporal language and enlisting things, right? So, for instance, if Arthur is retelling the story and he says, yeah, during the fishing trip, man, we had breakfast and we caught some bass and we caught some trout and we did a bunch of driving. We got on the boat and that was really fun. I'm using conjunctive language rather than temporal language, and that's not fact-changing literary devices. Now, imagine it was like a 3-day trip. And I said, hey, on the first day, this happened. And then the second day, this happened. And the third day, this happened. But instead, somebody's retelling the story and they go, on the fishing trip, this happened. Well, I'm changing the story in a way, but not in a way that changes any facts. So the type of literary devices that we want to hone in on about whether or not people are making up anything or feel the freedom to make up anything, we need to make sure that the alterations in the stories are things that are actually changing facts, like temporal markers, dates, times, and stuff like that, rather than just changing perspective. Or does that just what I'm trying to say make sense?
Yeah, I think it does make sense, and I think I certainly think in like in some cases that you know I'm pretty hesitant to call some things not quite contradictions or whatever, because I think that's probably too strong of language, but like discrepancies or like actual differences when it's just things like that. But I think there's also like kind of multiple contact points in the Lucan story, and I guess the beginning of Acts, that make this look more like Luke is intentionally changing something or changing the facts. And mostly it's, well, okay, so a couple of times, like in Luke 24:49, you know, Jesus says, and see, I am sending upon you what my Father promised, so stay here in the city until you've been clothed with power from on high. And the same sort of thing repeated a couple times in the beginning chapter of Acts. So like Acts 1:4, basically him saying the same thing, wait there for the promise of the Father. And then Acts 1:12 also saying like the disciples remained like near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away, after they witnessed Jesus' ascension and come back. So it's like a pretty short distance. They like kind of staying within Jerusalem this whole time. So it's a little odd to me that is present there, because I feel like that doesn't cohere all that well with me to an author that like is aware of the like Mark and Matthew like Galilee appearances. Like it kind of sounds like Jesus is precluding going to Galilee in those verses, because he's saying, well, you know, stay near Jerusalem, and even as they follow not to where he ascends, they stay near Jerusalem. So like that's one thing I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird as well. And I don't know, feel free to respond to that. I have like also one more place in it that, you know, makes me think the same thing. So
yeah, Arthur, you got anything right now on that, or Lamb? Mike is bothering me right now. I need to send him
me too. He just sent me a message.
He's bothering you too? Why? Mike, we're working. Stop.
Yes, I got to respond to this. Hold
on.
Sorry.
I'm almost done. I'm paying attention, Koopa, by the way. I heard everything you're saying. I just, gosh, Mike just always finds a way to ruin things. So, okay, let's put it this way. Help me understand. This is like a question I've asked other like actual historians, by the way, too. Help me understand what it is about any of these tensions that you think is best explained. And I think you know what I'm trying to say when I say that, right? In other words, if I'm going to put this in a Bayesian way, and I'm not going to expect you to give a Bayesian answer back, but we've interacted before.
Thank you.
Right? So, no, I don't want to put that on you. It's just, but you know how my mind works, right? So I'm going to try to explicate it like that, and then I'll try to put it in a different way. What is it about the hypothesis that Luke is changing facts rather than not changing facts? So what is it about that hypothesis that has a sufficiently higher prior probability? And what is it about that hypothesis that somehow is makes the things we're looking at more expected than some sort of non-fact changing hypothesis?
Sure.
Does what I'm trying to say there make sense? Again, I'm not expecting a technical answer back or anything like that. I'm just...
Yeah. I think that... so there's one more verse in this that I think is relevant and also does make that like prior probability at least, or like that probability at least for this case higher, which is in Luke 24:6, the wording that the angel...
Sorry, Luke, what?
Luke 24:6. The wording that the angel uses, he says, he is not here, he has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee, and then goes on to speak about the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. So the wording there, like fairly similar to back in, I would need to find it in Mark. What is the actual chapter in Mark? Let's see. I want to say Mark 16. Mark 16:7. So he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you'll see him just as he told you. So there's some similarities there. Like I think a lot of people would agree with, and I don't know if you guys do actually, on like Luke having Mark available and using it, and that change, or like that to me like reads better as a change to the angel's words. I think that the plausible motive here for changing Galilee to Jerusalem to me is mostly just that Jerusalem is like a very central place in the early church. Like Luke knows that that's where the some of Jesus's early followers ended up, and he's interested in telling in his next volume a narrative of the early church and how it developed, starting in Jerusalem. And so to me, this reads more like a correction of Mark and Matthew, of the disciples instead going into Jerusalem, where they end up in order for the church to go on later. And I guess the reason I'd say that the prior is like a bit higher for that, I just think that it seems like a lot of Christian authors in this time period, and I guess I'm using that loosely. I mean, like non-canonical works and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Like they're also pretty willing to like make changes to things, or give their own takes on how certain prominent events might have happened. And so I think that somewhat raises the probability here. So sorry, that was long. Feel free to respond to any of that.
No, you're good. Okay, Arthur, or Lamb, somebody want to say something there? Because Mike is bothering me still. I'm so sorry.
I'm looking through these texts a little bit. Cam, do you have something to say?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. Let's see.
And you can share your screen, Arthur, too.
No, I was just like flipping through the Mark passage and the Luke passage. One thing I would say is that I don't think it's a correction. Okay, I think it's an intentional use. Maybe you can say that there could be a theological reason and use of the way Luke's approaching this. So the Holy Spirit will come upon you. You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. Right. So that, like, you see that kind of expansion that's happening. It's like Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, broader than that, and then to the ends of the earth. And so Jerusalem is central there. I don't think it's a connection. Again, it's central not because of the early followers, like you were saying, is a correction, but it's central is because it's where Jesus dies. Right. And so that's one thought I would throw out there that might be helpful. Again, going back to this, these aren't like edits in regards to corrections and stuff like that, but there are aspects of theological writing that we need to take into consideration that all the Gospels employ. Right. And they either leave out information. Predominantly, I think they leave out information or condense information in regards to what's going on. And let's see. Just trying to backtrack kind of some of the stuff you said because it was a long kind of.
It was. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. And like, Koopa's a really chill dude. Obviously, you can tell. So if you want to like,
I want to throw a question
piece
at
by
you,
piece if
Koopa.
you need to.
And I don't want to like
Sure.
if you feel uncomfortable with this and you think I'm changing the subject, I'm not trying to do that. Okay. Suppose we were like, yeah, the Bible has mistakes in it. Like somebody takes a position like partial inspiration or something like that. Is that what's holding you back from becoming a Christian? Or like, is there not enough evidence that the resurrection happened and that these authors are reporting? Okay, this is just a thought experiment we're doing, folks. But like that the resurrection happened, Jesus died, resurrected from the dead, and it happened. The authors report these things predominantly factual, and they have some mistakes in there. Is that enough to keep you from like becoming a Christian? Is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it might depend on like what the extent of the ways that they're wrong are, like how much you feel like you can trust them to be saying things that are true to the historical Jesus. I also think it depends on kind of the magnitude of the mistakes, or maybe not mistakes, but like just taking like earlier Judaism and Christianity and like looking at them in totality. Like, does this all make sense? Like, does it seem more true than mythological? Like, based on based on whatever we can figure out with modern scholarship and whatnot. So I wouldn't say that, like, I don't think mistakes, even larger mistakes, are necessarily a thing that should keep somebody from believing. I feel like people should feel comfortable enough with those. But I also, I think I myself like have to look at more before I'd be able to figure out like what seems reasonable to believe, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's because even if we have mistakes in these passages that you brought up, they aren't. I think you would argue this as well, if I'm understanding you right. Like, you wouldn't argue that these are mistakes of the lack of knowledge, but rather Luke's doing something here, right?
Right. Yeah.
For his own purposes. And he still agrees with Mark and Matthew and John on the larger scope of what occurred with Jesus, specifically on the death, burial, and resurrection story. And if they're right on that, like, that's enough evidence or claims or whatever for one to become a Christian, and then deal with the kind of the side story, side quest, of like what's going on here, what's Luke actually doing, as opposed to the other gospels, and then and this is again why Christians have multiple kind of ways of trying to reconcile this. I mean, because the reason why I say this is because quite often I come across people who are hesitant to becoming Christians based on what I would consider peripheral issues, right? So like somebody's like under an assumption like if I become a Christian, I have to hold to young Earth creationism, and I don't hold to young Earth creationism, therefore I can't become a Christian. And you tell this person, hey man, you don't have to do that. Like you don't have to hold to young Earth creationism to become a Christian. And then all of a sudden they're like, what? I didn't know this. Like, okay, I'll become a Christian. Like I'm agreed on all the other points. And that's the sort of approach I want to kind of have with you is I'm just, because you're already open to this miracle stuff. Like, hey, there's supernatural activity that's possible and stuff like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing really quick, which by the way, I'm assuming it's Christian miracles, right? That you're seeing, Koopa. And so the question is, let's put it this way. In order to become a Christian, which is ultimately like what we're really gonna try to accomplish here, right? Like you have my end of the spectrum where I think we have the historical reportage model, right? And from there you have like the 21 unique testimonies and all that stuff. You've heard my maximalist case before. If that is true, are you believing in the resurrection? And this isn't a gotcha question. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where you're at. That's all.
Are you saying like the historical reportage model and?
Yes, like let's say because you know historical reportage model does not entail resurrection.
Right.
So, but if the historical reportage model is true, are you like, okay, Jesus probably rose from the dead?
I think that probably makes sense. I mean, maybe some reservations around like I feel like I still need to figure out like do messianic prophecies from the Old Testament, like do those seem to accurately reflect things? So I'm like, I don't know how much I can evaluate it just in isolation, but assuming I didn't have very many of the like outside stuff, then sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not asking you to do it in isolation. I'm saying like this is these are the data. That's the new data set, and whatever is in your background knowledge. That's what you got. That's all. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious where you're at. That's all. Yeah, man. I think what I would. Well, next week we're gonna have Caleb on to talk about miracles too. So it's like, because here's another thing. Like, I think you would be justified in becoming a Christian.
Yeah.
Just on miracles alone, right? Because like you can easily just ask the question, like, what's the probability that you have all these miracles that you think are strong candidates for actually like being general like real miracles, right? And they're all in Jesus' name, vindicating a particular religion, right? If Jesus is still alive today, that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot with any of that kind of stuff, right? It's just like think different ways or perspectives of thinking about things, if that makes sense.
Well, look, I'll give you a biblical example of this. I think it's good. So there's a guy in the Gospels who goes to Jesus and is asking for a miracle, and then Jesus says, "Do you believe?" And then the guy says, "I believe, but help me with my unbelief." Okay, now what we see in the biblical data is that you can simultaneously have belief and unbelief or doubt at the same time. And I think that's completely natural. And I'll give you an example in regards to real life. Suppose there's someone next to me that I want to pray for to get a healing. And I believe that God is able and willing to heal people. Like that's a belief I have. I actually have that. But I might not be believing in regards to the specific situation in which I'm about to pray and God will heal this person in this moment. So that would be a situation where I have belief and unbelief at the same time. And I don't think I go, well, I have unbelief, therefore I'm not going to make a decision or something like that. I can still act out upon it because I have this general belief. And you see this in the Old Testament with Daniel's friends, where they say that God is. I'm trying to quote it properly. God is able to rescue them from the furnace, but he might not. Just in case he doesn't, they will still not bow the knees. So they have this belief that God is able to rescue them from the furnace, but they also realize that God might not. He might not will to rescue them in that situation, and their kind of their decision doesn't change based on whether they will be released or not. They're still committed to God. And like you get these kind of contrasts, right? Like I shared with Dan yesterday. I was talking to him of so I have 4 children, and when I got married 10 years ago. Sorry, not 10 years ago. I got married coming up on our 14th wedding, 13th wedding anniversary. Hey, after 10 you're good. And so we got married in May. I had a dream in June, like 3rd week of June, that my wife was pregnant. And then I woke up and I had this belief, like to a certain extent, epistemic certainty, that my wife was pregnant. And so I called her up. I was at a retreat, and I called her up and I said, "Hey, you're pregnant." And she said, "No, you don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "No, man,
my wife would kill me, man."
Yeah. So, and we weren't like planning. We're newlyweds. We'd actually had kind of arguments in our premarital counseling of like when to have children. And I was like, "No, man, like I really think this was from the Lord." And mind you, I'm not a person who just jumps on like God told me like all the time. I'd have to be pretty certain of it. And so she said, "No." I got back from my retreat and I just couldn't shake it off. I just kept telling her, "I think you're pregnant." And she's like, "No. And so, about 4 weeks passed and she was late on, and she said, "Well, I'm late." And I said, "It's because you're pregnant. I've been telling you for 4 weeks you're pregnant." And she's like, "No, sometimes these things happen and you're late and all this stuff." And so one day we're going back from church and I drove to CVS and I was like, "Go get a pregnancy test. We're gonna see whether this is happening." She went and took the test and came back positive. She took 2 tests because she was in unbelief and disbelief that it was true. And then we went to the doctor that week, and then the doctor said, "You're 5 weeks pregnant." Now, if you were to calculate this, I had that dream when she was a week pregnant. Now, that was our first kid. He just turned 12. He's running around. And I brought this up actually to a pretty notable atheist. And I said, "Hey, how do you make sense of this?" My wife was next to me. My son was there. And I said, here's the woman I said this to. There's personal testimony and all this stuff. There's people in our community that know it very well when it was happening at the time. And I said, "That's my kid." And his response to me was like, "Weird, creepy things like this happen." And I was like, "But that's not explanatory. Like that doesn't give me enough." But if I were to assume the Christian worldview, like this makes complete sense why a situation like this would happen. Like it makes absolute sense why this would happen. It makes absolute sense that I'm in a relationship with Jesus and he tells me things. And I've had people ask me like, "Why would Jesus tell you something like that?" And my response has just been generally because he loves me, like because I'm in a relationship with him. Why? It's good news and it made me happy. Like he cares about me in that sense. And so that's kind of like when you add these kind of puzzles together, I think you do get convincing enough evidence to become a Christian, even though you have outstanding doubts that are still questions remaining in your mind. And what I want to suggest is that's okay. It's okay to become a Christian in the midst of that. Give your life to Jesus with the outstanding doubts as you reason through them. That's sort of my challenge. And I hope you understand my heart as I'm sharing these things with you.
Yeah, definitely. No, and I appreciate that that you're sharing that with me. I feel like those stories are interesting, and I also don't really know how to explain them much like the person that you were talking with about them. I feel like there's still more that I'd have to look into though in order to be more confident about like what I
Yeah.
should believe. But I appreciate you guys like, offering up your experiences and like talking to me about, these different bits of the Bible and like making sense of them, because that's helpful in anybody's journey seeking what the truth should be. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, man, that was awesome having you, bro.
Well, thanks. All right. Yep.
Catch you
I
later.
probably better get going. All right. See ya.
No, you're good.
Oh, man. God bless you.
All right. We are coming up at the 2-hour mark soon, so we have a bunch of super chats to get through. So we'll just kind of see how these next two guests go. We'll try to shotgun through some of these if we can. Mr. White, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm not really like a complete and total skeptic of Christianity. I think it's probably true. And I've grown up in the church, but I sort of have some struggles and doubts that make me question it a little bit. And one of them is actually very similar to the objection that the previous caller brought up. The whole idea of there being like kind of timeline differences in the Gospels. Like, say when Jesus appeared to the women in John 20, 1 through 18 versus Matthew 1 through 10. And, of course, there is the literary devices thing, which I'm not entirely sure that's what's going on here. But, Than, a question for you. I am sort of wondering, what do you think is going on here if there isn't some kind of literary devices? Do you just accept the contradiction, or?
Well, remember, I'm not against literary devices, simpliciter. I'm not against isn't probably even the right word. What I'm saying though is that like when I'm looking at the Gospels and Acts in general, and I'm looking at the texture in the way that they're written, the texture doesn't portray authors that would feel the freedom to like literally just make stuff up for the sake of their own rhetorical purposes. But that doesn't preclude literary devices that do not include the process of making stuff up. Kind of like that, the technical term is dischronological versus achronological narration. So chronological narration is just like event 1 happened, and then 2 happened, and then 3 happened. Achronological narration would be 1 and 2 and 3, and then dischronological would be 4 happened, and then 1 happened, where you're kind of actually changing the facts, right? So the thing that I think most likely doesn't happen in the Gospels and Acts is the fact-changing literary devices. So things like compression are not going to be fact-changing. It's going to be a literary device, but it's not a fact-changing one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess sort of like the part where it like portrays like in John how Mary Magdalene was really like distraught and distressed after seeing that Jesus wasn't there. And of course this is before the angels had appeared. And then she goes back and gets the disciples, but it's like the timeline's different in, say, the synoptics. So I mean, do you think that that's just sort of a moving around of the events then?
Man, I wish you would have come in a little earlier, because I'd love to actually go through all of those events. Have you watched Eric Manning's Testifies videos on this?
I am a subscriber to his channel, but I'm not sure I've gone through a lot of his videos on that, no.
Okay. I would highly recommend, or Arthur, do you have any videos on this topic too, by the way?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
But yeah, Eric's a good guy. He's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, Eric's a homie, dude. Okay. I highly recommend going to Testify, Eric Manning's channel, and looking through some of those videos on just a lot of these things that you're talking about.
Mhm.
I think he does a really good job. So just for
Okay.
the
Is
sake
there
of
like
time right
a
now, do you understand?
yeah, right. Is there like a specific video that you have in mind, or is it just like a
Not off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure if you just like go into YouTube or Google search and just type in like Eric Manning or like Testify and type in contradictions,
Mhm.
I don't think Eric and I disagree on almost anything when it comes to some of this stuff. So
Okay.
the prior probability that I would affirm anything he says is gonna be really high.
I see. Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me on anyway. I do kind of wish I came in earlier to have a deeper conversation,
Yeah, man,
but
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Yeah, you guys have
By
a
the way,
good day though. God bless.
yeah, you too, brother. I wanted to talk to him some more, but one, I got to go hang out with my kids. This week has been insanely busy, man. Like, I just haven't seen my kids, and whatever my wife is cooking smells really good.
That's why your office has to be away from the house, man.
Dude, it's in the basement. It's in the basement.
Comes through the vents. You're
Oh
like,
man, Eisen,
you're
how's it
not
going?
hungry, and then all of a sudden you're like, I think I'm hungry.
It's exactly what happened, man.
So am I on?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. I was watching on YouTube. I had this muted, so I didn't even realize. That's my bad.
No, you're good.
All
How's
right,
it going,
right, right.
Eisen?
Yeah, I'm doing decent. Yeah, but I tend to agree with you guys. When I watch you and Michael Jones and stuff, you say uh when you say that extraordinary claims don't require extraordinary evidence, because obviously what you're going to consider extraordinary is going to be dependent on, say, your priors or your presuppositions or whatever.
Mhm.
But so you can't really quantify how far removed a claim is from what you believe. But even still, there seems to be some. I can't help but intuitively agree to some extent that if you have a claim, there is something that's separating two claims to where the evidentiary basis for both could be exactly the same, but I'm more likely to accept one. Like, in terms of, okay, so like my friend tells me he has a pet dragon versus he tells me he has a pet dog, right? And the evidence
Mhm.
is exactly the same for both. And it just made me think about this because, like, so for instance, I was talking to this Muslim guy and he was presenting his evidence to me. There's 5 separate companions of Muhammad who witnessed the moon get split, or claimed to in the hadiths at separate locations within Arabia. And obviously that's just nonsense because I can easily make an argument from silence to debunk that. But it's more like in terms of the way he presented to me was, if testimony is valid in a court of law, why is this testimony not? And I was tempted to make that argument to him, like, the extraordinary nature of the claim is going to make this evidence, like, it's going to be false either way. But
Yeah.
I was
No, I
tempted to make the
totally.
atheist argument to him.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you said a buzzword that tickled my brain, right? You said priors. So, um, in on our Inspiring Philosophy Academy channel, I actually have a video talking about that phrase, extraordinary claims requires extraordinary evidence. And since you brought up priors, all I really do is I just kind of steel man what that phrase could mean um, in the most understandable way that's actually like coherent, right? Which is just basically hypotheses that have a low prior probability need enough evidence to overcome the low prior. Is that fair? Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I
Okay.
would agree with that.
So in that sense, we have that's solid ground on, right? And so applying this to the resurrection, let's put it this way. Let's just say that you think there's a low prior probability for the resurrection of Jesus, right? Um, well, now the question is, if I just grant that, right? Let's just say you're an agnostic about whether or not God exists. And you might think like, when I look around the world, dead people stay dead. Now, I would argue against that type of reasoning and all that kind of stuff, right? But like, let's just momentarily grant this, okay? Well, the thing is,
You're
you're not
granting that
going to
there's a low
judge.
prior probability.
Yeah, just momentarily granting the low prior probability for the resurrection. Because this is one of the things that I think people just fail to appreciate about how we go about arguing for certain things, right? Because like we're never going to argue things in the isolation of one domain of evidence, right? There's going to be different types of evidence, and there's going to be different categories of evidence, and there's going to be different piles of evidence. So let's just put it this way. Say you have a low prior probability for the resurrection of Jesus, but then you come across the historical data, and you might just think like, look, this is like, you might say the best explanation of the historical data is the resurrection of Jesus, right? But the thing is, the prior is still really low. Well, then you might still think, hey, there's a bump in the probability of the resurrection of Jesus relative to him not rising from the dead. But the prior was just so low that, like, I still think the most probable thing is that Jesus did not rise from the dead, just based off the historical data. But then what happens is, well, hey, if that didn't convince you, I'm totally okay with that. Let's throw in some other things, which is what I would do, is the move from modern day miracles again. Because then what happens is, well, if I just keep throwing on these miracle claims that you just can't really explain on a naturalistic basis, right? And all of these are done in the name of Jesus, right? So you have people getting healed instantaneously, sometimes on camera, from ailments that it's medically impossible to be healed from. You can't cure them. There's sometimes treatments, you don't go into spontaneous remission from them. Or if you do go into spontaneous remission, it comes back. Like, just imagine all of that's happening, right? And you come across, I don't know, 5. Even I have like about 50 of them that I would present, but let's just say 5. So let me ask you this. All of that's done in Jesus' name. And now let's go back to the resurrection question. If Jesus rose from the dead, how likely is this data? And if Jesus is still dead, how likely is that data?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you get the thought process there?
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
you're okay.
Sorry. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. That makes perfect sense actually to me. So basically, so you're increasing the probability in their mind, and then that's going to make it easier if you use a different argument, basically.
Yeah, and it all depends. Like it does, like, okay, at least psychologically it might matter when whether you do miracles or the historical stuff first, right? Because like somebody might not be even willing to grant that the historical data raises the probability, right? Just on a psychological basis. And so you might go to the modern day miracle claims first, and then they might be more open to the historical stuff, right?
Yeah.
But if you take psychology out of the question and just go strictly from a logical and like mathematical perspective, it doesn't really matter, because mathematically the priors will rise with the historical, the posterior, and therefore the priors will rise when you're looking at the historical stuff. But then you can go to the miracles and then keep raising it, right? On the other hand, if you go to miracles first and then you're actually convinced that some of these miracles are real, you might have, that means that the prior probability of the resurrection is going to be higher when you start investigating the historical data. So, if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say.
I see what you're saying. Like, I totally see what you're saying. Like, if you're being purely logical versus, like a cycle, like what's gonna be
Yeah,
persuasive to them. Would
yeah.
you would you think like a classical argument would raise the priors as well, or no?
Can you help me understand what you mean by classical argument?
Oh, I meant like the Thomas Aquinas's from motion
Oh,
as being particular. Oh, but you could use Kalam as well. But I was just wondering if you would think those would.
yeah. So look. So I mean, obviously, raising. I shouldn't say obviously. Some people would try to dispute this. But I would say arguing for God's existence, right? Simpliciter, I would argue, does raise the prior probability of a resurrection. Um, but then from there, I think there's other things that you can actually even argue for to raise the priors, even without historical evidence or miracles. So, for instance, it's not out yet. I really wish I could take like 2 or 3 months off of this so I can finish my book. Um, because I've had agnostic and atheist philosophers look at my theodicy already, and they like it, but you know how philosophers are going to be, right? They think it's really cool though. So, but the basic idea is like, If you look at my theodicy, for instance, I think I argue quite persuasively that if God exists, you're going to expect that God would become incarnate and defeat death on our behalf and promise the defeat of death on our behalf and defeat suffering and all this other stuff, right? And so if you have that, do you know what a type token distinction is?
No, I don't know what that is.
Totally fine, totally fine. So a type is like a general category of things, like battery, right? You can say it's a type, but then like this particular battery is a token. Does that make sense? So if I had a different battery, it'd be a different token, but the type is the category. Does that make sense?
You said so the type is the battery and the token is the
The
what?
type is like the category. So like the category battery is a type, and then like this particular object would be called a token.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So I can make a type token distinction here and say like, okay, well, if my argument runs and if God exists, you're going to expect that kind of a thing. Well, that means I can have a type of incarnating, defeating of death type of God, right? And so then I can kind of look into the religious landscape and look and see that Christianity is the only one that actually fits into that mold, right? And that's going to give me reasons for thinking that God would become incarnate and would defeat death on our behalf and do all these things, therefore raising the prior probability of the resurrection of Jesus. Other things you can do too is, for instance, Mike and I have argued extensively that Christianity has been on the whole like a benefit to the world, right? So now here's another, and I'm yapping a lot, Eisen, I'm sorry. This is the stuff I get excited about. So
No, that's good.
if you're willing to grant that statement that I just made about Christianity being good for the world, well, here's a way to think about things. Prior to the death and resurrection of Jesus, would God have known, if he exists, that vindicating this message of Jesus through his resurrection would cause all these good effects for the world?
Sorry, am I supposed to answer that?
No, you're okay. Oh, sorry. No, it's if you want to, you can. Otherwise,
Okay.
the answer would be yes, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if God knows that raising somebody like Jesus from the dead would bring about all these good effects, then I think we have good reason for thinking that God would want to raise Jesus from the dead in order to bring about all those good effects. So then, like, yet again, that's just like another piece of evidence that like you wouldn't naturally think about, but it fits really neatly with how we assess all these probabilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think you were saying you're busy or something. I don't want to keep you too long, but
No, you're good. Yeah, we're on the 2-hour mark, so we're just again, we get a lot of super chats, so I'm trying to speed run through a little bit of things, but
one last thing. Okay, so miracles and resurrection. What do you think about like prophecies in the Bible? Are those good evidence or are those trash?
I just want to say like just some wisdom here. The New Testament definitely doesn't view prophecies as trash.
Yes.
So here, my thing with people is always, look, stick to the New Testament and how they view these prophecies. If you're gonna kind of come up with your own thing from the Old Testament that you think is a prophecy that the New Testament doesn't include in it, I would just be cautious to claim that that's actually a proper interpretation of that quote unquote prophecy.
Okay.
Because of a number of reasons, chief amongst them that the New Testament authors knew the text way better than we do. And if that was such a clear prophecy that you think it is, whatever it may be, they would have kind of included that in there for their purposes. So if people are kind of coming up with, they think something is prophetic and then it's not in the New Testament, and then you really don't see other people leaning on that as a prophetic thing, it's likely that they're wrong about that. They're misinterpreting it. But definitely the New Testament views certain arguments, certain prophetic arguments, as legitimate arguments because they validate it. They use it in the writing. I wouldn't just use language like it's like categorically it's very unfair and incorrect, I would say, to say that arguments from prophecy are are trash. What I would say is it implies or assumes that there is an agreement between the two parties. So, like, if I'm talking to an atheist, I'm generally not bringing up prophetic stuff because we're not in agreement on a bunch of stuff. You have to realize that the New Testament authors that are using these writings as prophetic have an audience that generally agrees that God exists, that the God of Israel exists, that these Old Testament writings are actually inspired from God. And so because those agreements are there, then they can use prophetic writings. But if those things aren't there, you're probably not going to get anywhere with
So,
prophetic
like, you wouldn't, like, for the proposition that Christianity's true or something, you wouldn't use a prophecy as an evidence if you were talking to an atheist or an agnostic?
I
You
generally
generally wouldn't?
I generally don't, because there's already a disagreement on a bunch of different levels. Now, I use the word generally there because there are individuals that sometimes I come across, even though they're agnostic or atheist in the moment, but might find themselves that recently had an experience or something like that, and they're way more open to some of these things. And maybe I can show them a number of these and say, hey, maybe the way the Thans goes about it, like, what's the probability of a number of these things being true about one individual? But that implies or requires a certain kind of openness in the person. I'm just, again, going back to the biblical data. It's important to realize that the authors are speaking to individuals that already agree with these things. There's already a base agreement. Like, why does Paul end up in synagogues and argue from the scriptures that these are the things that should have or must have happened to the Messiah, the Christ? Because the synagogue people already agree with Paul on the existence of God, on the inspiration of the text, on certain prophecies that they're already waiting for, the Messiah they're waiting for. Like, all of these things are in agreement. And then what he's saying is, here's the fulfillment, guys. And then so, like, what you see in the book of Acts is like the Bereans are actually searching through the scriptures to see if what Paul was teaching actually corresponds to the text of the Bible. So those agreements matter, I think, in normal conversations.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm in agreement with Arthur, by the way. I'll just kind of keep this short. I think the way that the argument from prophecy is typically done in, like, popular contexts, I think is a little misguided. But I think what ends up happening is, if you take the ancient Near Eastern context of prophecy from the Hebrew Bible and then look at the Second Temple context of how the New Testament uses prophecy, and then you get the person to, like, psychologically put themselves in the Second Temple period, then all of a sudden I think you have a really strong argument, actually, because prophecy in the Second Temple period also was, like, people will clown on typological stuff, but the thing is, it's actually really interesting because now all of a sudden it's not like you have these predictive prophecies about these very specific deterministic events, but instead the prophecy is seen as Jesus as being a retelling of Israel's story. And now you have to ask a really weird question, which is, how did this guy have a life filled with so many narrative motifs that fit so well? That to me is even weirder, to be honest with you, because now you have this combination of what I would argue is very strong evidence that the gospel authors didn't feel the freedom to make up facts. What they did instead is they looked at the life of Jesus and go, oh my goodness, I see the new Moses here. I see this pattern here. I see this pattern here. This is the promised Messiah. This is God with us. And I wish, man, dude, I can't wait for the day that I can actually unpack that into a video, because it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot, man. That's going to be a long video, in my opinion.
Where are you going to make your video? Is it going to be on YouTube or TikTok or what?
Yeah, here on our Inspiring Philosophy page.
Okay. I always watch Inspiring Philosophy. I don't think I've ever seen a video from you. I don't know why, but in any case,
that's because Mike is trying to keep Dan down, bro.
Yeah,
He's
Yeah,
he's
that might
trying to
Boston's
press
gonna
him.
keep me down.
I was mainly just asking because my buddy on Discord, he was telling me this one prophecy, but it was from an apocryphal book. It was from Song of
Mm.
Solomon, I think 2 or 3 or something. And he was telling me it's a good one. So I don't know, but I just want to get your opinion on that. I don't know if you guys know the one I'm talking about.
I don't. But if you're gonna bring
Wait,
it up real quick, Arthur.
Song of Solomon.
I probably wouldn't be able to find the tab anyway. Song of Solomon, like 2 or 3 or something. It's apocryphal. I probably don't. I probably wouldn't be able to find
Well, do me a favor. If
Yeah.
you're interested in like learning about it or something like that, because I don't know what it could be talking about. Just shoot me an email, Than THAN at inspiringphilosophy.com.
Yeah, probably like super chat or email or something of it. But yeah, I know you guys are trying to get to your thing. But
Yeah,
is that
yeah. Dude, whatever. Dude, I am like salivating right now. No.
Alright.
We got a bunch of, like I said too, we got a bunch of super chats to get through. Eisen, it was a blessing talking to you, man.
Yeah, it was.
Seriously.
man.
Where are
Yeah.
you at, by the way? Are you a Christian? Are you an agnostic? Or
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
okay, awesome. Well, man, it was
Yeah,
a
just trying
blessing
to improve
talking to you,
my-
brother.
my stuff. But all right, guys, peace out. Yep.
All right, catch you
Because
later. Oh yeah, I see you down there, bro. But we're gonna go through the super chats and then we're gonna call the stream. Okay. Thanks for understanding. Okay, so let's go through these super chats and then let's go to get out of here. All right. Can you be a monarchical Trinitarian and Catholic? Yes. It depends on your model of God as a Catholic, right? Because I would just argue as a Catholic you have to have very specific models of God. And so if you just have to fit it within a particular model, like if you're a Scotist, I think you could probably make that work. Lamb, do you got any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, you can they hold to specific monarchical like relationships as well with like the sort of like hierarchy of the father in terms of relationship. But yeah, like you said, they would probably hold specific scholastic commitments that can't be broken. So but if you mean like monarchical like in a Sijuwadi sense, then they may have some contentions with that.
Yeah. Arthur, can you flesh out what you meant by the Aristotle idea that you thought you Aristotle idea thought you why is that breaking my brain? You brought up. Do you mean be wise or more censorship?
So the idea I brought up from Aristotle had to do with like Aristotle's view of women, because he views women as like defective men. That has various connotations in regards to Greek philosophy and Greek society that develops out of it. And what I was saying is that Christians need to be very wise as to the way we approach philosophical writings and the ideas of philosophers. That just because something might seem right to us or might even seem wrong, I don't know, like either situation, we have to take that in light of Scripture. And be able to, at the very least, bring them together, reconcile them, right? Not go, oh, this idea philosophically is great, and I'm going to pursue it and believe it, when it like just face value contradicts Scripture.
Yeah,
you have a problem, even though it's philosophically convincing. You got something like the Word of God that's contradicting it. And Christians have done this all throughout century. And some issues you can definitely like bridge the gap. Like and so you're going to get people like Augustine who leans like towards a Platonist, and then you have Aquinas who's more Aristotelian in his thinking. And so you're going to have Christians who are disagreeing on these matters. My issue is predominantly with like keeping a very high respect and place for the Word of God as being the inspired Word of God and authoritative in these matters specifically.
Very based. I love that. Thank you for the 5 gifted memberships, Randy. You are a Giga Chad. Out of church 1+ year due to panic attacks from GAD and MDD. After therapy and SSRI, I want to find a different church, but don't want to church hop. I've been non-denom, but want to try something more rooted in tradition. Any advice? I personally really struggle giving advice with these types of situations because it's like, I don't know you, man.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't want to steer you the wrong direction by not knowing, because by just giving something out without knowing who you are. You know, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I was gonna say because we don't know the nature of, I guess, like your medical or psychological issues, and if they're rooted in the fact that you're going to a non-denom church, and even if it is rooted like the non-denominational church being something that sort of causes that to be a problem, if that's even going to be the case for all non-denom churches, right? There might be like a specific aspect of that church particularly, and so it's hard to really gauge whether or not there could be any advice on that level. And then also like what you find appealing about what you believe tradition is, right? And then so it's a little hard to give something direct because there's a lot of unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm a non-denominational evangelical Christian, and one of the things that I think is extremely important is the community aspect, rather than like treating church as a kind of event we go to. And I mean this across the board, by the way, within Christian denominations, across the board. Do we have people who show up to church on Sundays like it's an event they go to? And I wish that people were more in tuned and connected with the community at that church. Like genuine friendships, not people you just see on Sundays, and then it's like hi and bye. At my church, I'm extremely close with the people. But maybe one of the things that you can do is show up to a Bible study. Not necessarily just go like low church, high church, or something like that, but show up to a Bible study and see whether you connect with the individuals in a smaller group. It's maybe less intimidating and all that stuff, and see whether you can develop good community there. And then go from there to like, hey, I want to make this a part of my regular. And then the commitment level also is not as much, if that bothers you. Like if you're going to show up and feel like you're immediately like committed to go every Sunday, or say show up on a Bible study day and get to know some people and ask some questions. But I would agree with that. It's very difficult giving advice in situations like this, considering there is some psychological things going on. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Mike isn't here, but he would probably say something like, find a church that's going to be spiritually edifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Richard Carrier literally has a PhD, not a smart guy. Dang, dude. Jerome said he prefers Hebrew version of Matthew. Well, I appreciate that, Fish. We're going to speed past just for sake of time, though. Hello, Gas Mask Buddha. Sushi Arthur. Sushi. Do you like sushi, Arthur?
I do. I love sushi. Yeah.
All right. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go on a sushi date next time we see each other.
Hey,
Deal?
All day.
Than, stop using muscle shirts to do philosophy. This is a large. I am 5'7". I have 44-inch shoulders. If I wear anything bigger, I'm going to look like I'm wearing a dress. It's not my fault. Stop body shaming me.
Come on now.
I just had a shower thought on a possible new argument against the general confirmation response against the Islamic dilemma from Bible First Route. I need to workshop it with others first. Well, Noxie, you're in our Discord server, man. Just tag me once you have a formulation for it. I'd love to see it. How do you prove that Jesus is God using the Old Testament? How do you prove this to Jews? Man, I'm going to just say, wait until you see my 2 powers video that comes out, because you will be convinced that the lie that the Trinity was invented at Nicaea and is a later tradition is nothing more than a rabbinic Jewish psyop. Look at these guys now nodding their heads.
That's
how you
100%.
know it's true.
That's 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Keep yelling.
Hey man, yelling this and shouting it to the rooftops doesn't make it true. I'm just saying, because okay, what's happening here? Okay, so he's looking at. I'm assuming you're probably going to look at Strong's, and here's the thing. That's totally fine. Let's just say the literal translation of the word is this: The context is what demands what I'm saying. When you look at Matthew 26, this is the Passover cup that he's talking about. Hence, the definite article. When you look at the text, it says the cup. The cup. What is the cup? I don't even know why I'm dignifying this.
It's just hilarious. Like we explained why the context is and why it says different stuff, and how you're committing a word study fallacy, and then you just committed a word study fallacy.
I know. Thank you, Randy, for all those memberships again. But I thought we were your kids. You guys are my children too. I love you.
Gosh, that's
and
weird.
I want to take care of you. Okay. If Mike was listening to this, he'd probably kick me off the stream at this point. But it's okay. Mike is gone. He can't hurt you guys.
Wait, they're your kids? I thought they were your puppies.
They're my puppies too. That's true. Arthur, I don't know if you know about that the context for that. One day we opened up the stream. Mike said something, and then he's like, "Man, we need to get like a new opening line." And then I had an ADHD word vomit moment where I just said, "Bark with me if you're my puppies."
Oh man.
And it stuck. Cosmic says Arthur might be all right. He's more than all right. Honestly.
I just might be, man. I just might be.
Seriously, no, Arthur, I'm serious, man. Whenever we're at conferences and stuff, like I see other people, and there's people that I'm like excited to see, and then there's people where I'm like, oh, I'm excited that he's here, and you're one of those guys, man.
I appreciate
You're
that,
so much
man.
fun.
I appreciate that. I'll say this, that I'm extremely extroverted considering the nerdy apologetics types and philosophical types.
Yeah.
And so that helps in many areas. I tend to be the life of the party. And then boring people like Michael Jones make me uncomfortable because they just want to be left alone to sit in a corner on their laptops and stuff, you know. And
I'm
weirdos
pretty
like
sure.
me would.
Yeah, Mike always defends himself, and he says he got tested for autism, but I'm not convinced that it's a mistaken
He
diagnosis.
just likes to be alone. And I'm man, I'm not gonna get into it, but I have a good relationship with Mike. It's funny.
I love Mike.
Mike's
All right,
gonna
guys.
listen back to this. He's gonna be like, they're always talking about me when I'm not around.
We'll say it to his face.
Yeah, I will too. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening. God bless you all. This is a fun stream. Make sure you go to Apologia Center and subscribe, or else I will take my shahada. Same with Lamb Apologetics. Good night, everybody. God bless.
You made it to the end of this video, which means this message matters to you. If you want to see more content like this reaching people for Christ, you can help make it happen. Your support makes these videos possible. Click the link below and donate today. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining our Patreon community. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and a place to connect with others passionate about this mission.